This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and around the world on the Starcom Radio Network. If you'd like to give us a call, worldwide toll-free, lines are now open at 1-800-610-7035. That's 1-800-610-7035, and if you press 0 for the extension, it brings you right into our broadcast studio. You can always send an email to onair@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can send me a chat message on Skype. Our Skype address is X-Zone Radio TV. What a day it is today. It was just one of those great days. Last week this time we were sweltering in 92-degree temperature. On Sunday it went down to nearly freezing. In fact, we had to turn the furnace back on in order to get some semblance of summer again. And today, well, you know what? It's not that bad. It's actually 63 degrees. So I guess this is a heat wave Canadian style. After all, we've got, snow. We have igloos. And our mail is delivered by dog sled. Not really, but close to it. My guest this hour is a gentleman we've had the pleasure of having on the show before. Brad OLSEN is his name. And we're going to be talking to Brad this hour about the esoteric world. On past shows, Brad's talked about his travels, his lectures, and what it's like being a publisher in general. So without further ado, Brad OLSEN, welcome back to the X-Zone, my friend. Great talking to you again.
Hey, Rob. Always great to talk to you. Thanks for having me back on.
The esoteric world. How would you describe the word esoteric?
Well, if we were to take a dictionary definition, it would be something along the lines of knowledge that is acquired by a select few or in company of those who are processing information that is not generally known to the wider audience. The wider audience definition is called exoteric, whereas esoteric is that information for a select few. So I find these subjects to be very fascinating, always have throughout my life, and I really loved the opportunity to be able to compile them in this series, as well as some of the esoteric notions of some of these sacred places that I covered in a previous travel series that I've done.
Speaking about sacred places, I was speaking to my friend Ed Till today, who, by the way, has a great show on the Starcom Radio Network Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. Plug. And we were talking about who was coming on the show tonight. And I mentioned you were coming on, that we were going to be talking about the esoteric world and sacred places. And he asked a question: have we solved the riddle of Stonehenge yet?
Well, there are so many riddles within enigmas wrapped in mysteries surrounding Stonehenge. I'm not sure if we'll ever really quite get to the bottom of that. But it's a great question, and I just want to preface it by saying that think about how we viewed Stonehenge only a few hundred years ago. It was just a pile of standing stones.
Yeah.
They were vandalized, they were knocked down, there was no regard for history or what they were. And only in the last 50 or so years, through the study of archaeoastronomy, did we realize that Stonehenge is a very complex calendar and sighting devices for solstices, for lunar events, and for the movement of celestial bodies in the sky. So it shows that the builders of Stonehenge were far more sophisticated than may have gotten credit for.
Now, I know a lot of people talk about the Druids when it comes to Stonehenge. Is that still the main consensus, that the Druids were responsible for the building of Stonehenge?
I'm not sure we can ascribe anyone as the builders. It's just not known. I mean, they say that there is a tradition of doing ceremony there, but those ceremonies could date back long after the structure itself was built.
What are some of the other sacred sites that you've visited and that you've written about in your books?
Oh, geez, there's dozens, perhaps hundreds. And I've done 3 books: Sacred Places Europe, Sacred Places North America, and Sacred Places around the world. But I do get this question a lot, and I have to say that the Great Pyramids are number one in my book as far as the most enigmatic, esoteric, and mysterious sites that we still don't have nearly enough answers about how and why these structures were built.
What was it like actually going into the pyramids? Did you feel anything special happening? Was there?
I did, and I actually had the opportunity to climb to the top of the Great Pyramid quite illegally. I don't think many people could get away with it these days, but I did in '93, and I actually had an epiphany moment when I was up there.
What was that? Oh my God! Well, how did I get up here, and how the hell do I get down?
And how do I avoid capture coming down? Well, I got caught the very first time on one side of the pyramid. It was during the sound and light show, and they blast the pyramids with these great big lights that just are very brilliant to the eye if you're standing right next to them. And I had known that it's really a trick of visual perception, that when something very bright goes to dark, there's a period where you can't really see so good. So I use this as my opportunity. After I got caught once, I walked around to the other side, noticed nobody was looking, and made a break for it, and got up and got down without getting caught. So the epiphany moment was just basically that my grandfather had passed away, and I was sad that I was traveling around the world and hadn't had the opportunity to be at his funeral. So I just felt a connection with him at that moment, and just kind of put me in a space where I went from pretty much a diehard atheist to believing that maybe there is something else out there.
Why do you think spirituality and the esoteric is catching on and gaining momentum these days, Brad?
Well, just like my experience on the pyramid, I think we all have very interpersonal moments from time to time. And let's face it, modern religion isn't really giving us all the answers that we seek. So people are I wouldn't say quite grasping, but are yearning for an understanding of what there is to this human experience.
Exonation, Brad OLSEN is my very special guest this hour. And if you'd like more information on Brad, or if you'd like to get any of his books, they're available on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble and other online and regular bookstores. But his website is www.cccpublishing.com. And you also have another website, don't you, Brad?
You can go to see more about what I do at bradolsen.com. That's spelled OLSEN. And you can also see some of my adventures around the world on stompers.com.
Stompers?
Named after my first book called World Stompers, which is still in print, a global travel manifesto to give advice to other budding young travelers who may want to set off on a multi-month or multi-year trip.
When you're traveling around the world, do you notice the spiritual aspect of the world coming to life, or is it just in certain areas?
I do kind of think it is in certain areas, and this does correspond with the Native American perception of the power of place, as well as some of the older pagan traditions that had existed. Because, for example, many of the old cathedrals in Europe are built upon smaller chapels, which were built upon pagan shrines, which were built upon sacred wells or entrances to caves or things like that. So there seems to have been a perception that this is the place, this is where we have to build, and then successive generations of building have taken place on that very exact same spot.
In your investigation and research into sacred places, Brad, have you noticed a common thread between all these various sacred places located around the world? Are they connected in one way or another?
Well, there is some that are connected via ley lines, and these are more dominant in Europe where they have been studied and where many of the shrines, I'll give an example, the St. Michael's line, which is almost a direct line from the outer islands of Skelling Michael in Ireland through Cornwall in England, where there are St. Michael chapels and temples and shrines, through France, the St. Michael's Grotto in Italy, to the St. Michael Chapel in the Holy Land. So it would seem that people back then, when they built these, had no idea of ley lines or why they were putting them where they were, but it just so happens now that we can map them out and see these straight lines, and there's all kinds of them. There's dragon lines in the east. There's another one in England called the St. Mary's line. And I haven't seen too many graphs here in North America, but I might assume down in Chaco Canyon, the straightness of the roads that they built to their great houses may also correspond with that.
Whatever happened to the theory, Brad, I don't know if you and I talked about this before, that the Egyptians were actually in the Grand Canyon and Egyptian artifacts have been found there.
Well, indeed. There was a big article in a newspaper in, I believe, Phoenix, Arizona in the 1930s that said that this archaeologist had discovered all these Egyptian ruins and artifacts as well, and he took them out and he had photographs. Well, the story went cold right after that, as soon as the Smithsonian moved in on it, and this is one of the aspects of what's called Smithsonian Gate, the big cover-up of artifacts or remains of giants or other things that were just out of place. They call them out-of-place artifacts, or UPAs. And this story just ran cold. Now, I have to tell you, I've been rafting down the Grand Canyon for 2 weeks, and I was very, very interested in this and inquired as much as I could with my guide and other people. And there is indeed an area of the Grand Canyon that is completely forbidden to enter for anyone. And they have names like the Osiris Mesa and mountain named after Isis and things like that. Like, they even have Egyptian names ascribed to it, but no way can anybody go near them.
Brad, what would be the danger? What earth-shaking, massive cover-up would be unexposed or unearthed if we did, in fact, were able to say that, hey, the Egyptians were here. Good for them.
Well, certainly what it would do is say, hey, the Egyptians obviously had a worldview, and they obviously knew how to get around. How did they do that? Did they do it by boat? Did they land on a shore and hike? Or perhaps maybe they had some kind of technology, some flying craft that still has yet to be explained.
Is it possible, Brad, that the Egyptians, like so many other cultures, really had advanced technology for their time and we're just rediscovering it now? Is this possible in the case of the Egyptians coming over to North America?
Well, if we just take one example called the Assyrian, which isn't too far from the Great Pyramids of Giza, we see these megalithic blocks, I mean, hundreds of thousands of pounds, that are all situated very precisely upon one another. Not only that, but there is this engraving, and I have a photo of it in Modern Esoteric, of the flower of life pattern.
Wow.
And this also corresponds to a chapter in that book called Sacred Geometry, which is not carved onto the rock, Rob. It is burned, like a laser burn, onto the rock of the Assyrian. And this, again, defies logic how it was done, just as the megalithic structure of this temple complex.
Do you think academia is also part of this anthropological cover-up?
Well, they certainly are, and the head of Egyptian antiquities is a gentleman named Zahi Hawass, and he routinely blocks anyone who makes an attempt to either scan the Giza Plateau, which when they did, it was right around the time I was there in 1993 when some of the first scans occurred. They found that the Giza Plateau was like Swiss cheese. There were chambers and tunnels and levels, and it was very complex. Well, if you ask Mr. Hawass, he just flatly denies there's anything under there, maybe a well or a lost stairway or something, but will not give any kind of hint that these chambers are real.
What do you think the impact would be on the world religious philosophies if the real truth of the Earth's past was discovered and, just given to people to understand?
And to acknowledge, I just hope this happens within our life, Rob. I would just like to think that you and I may even have a small part in helping people understand that the picture is very big, that the universe is very complex, and the possibility of dimensions and perhaps other entities within those dimensions coming into our dimensions are all in the realm of physics, quantum physics, and some advanced science that is coming to the fore. So certainly science is catching up, and archaeology hopefully will free itself from all the blocks that it's had, and we can just start talking about these things for what they are rather than dismissing them outright.
Exo Nation, my guest this hour is my friend Brad Olsen. And if you'd like to find out more about Brad, two websites, www.bradolsen.com or www.cccpublishing.com. And you're listening to us live and around the world on the Starcom Radio Network. 1-800-610-7035 worldwide toll-free. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. That's the general email address. But if you'd like to contact us here in studio and have us relay a question to our guests, it's on air at xzoneradiotv.com, and you can always listen to the X Zone Radio Show 24/7, 365 at www.xzoneradiotv.com. Brad, in your opinion, what has been the most significant archaeological discovery that John Q. Public has been made aware of over the last 20 years?
Well, there are many, but I would have to say here in North America is the discovery in many locations across the continent of these giant humanoid-like figure. And I say humanoid because they're not like us. Some of them have these double rows of teeth. Obviously, that is not known in the human genome. Or the fact that they're way taller than any human has ever gotten. I think the tallest man alive was that gentleman from Alton, Illinois, and he was not quite 9 feet tall. Well, some of these are 9 feet tall or higher. Most of them are in the 7 to 8 foot range, and that's awfully tall for humans as well. And the fact that many of these, and you can find old newspaper clippings where they have been found. And again, the Smithsonian gets called in. You never hear about it ever again, nor do you ever see some of these giants. Well, in Modern Esoteric, I do have a photo of one that was found in California, and he was about 9 feet tall. And the two people who discovered it are standing next to this mummified body side by side, and they're like half as tall as this mummified giant. So I have to say this is one thing that is just coming out, and they do continue to find these double-rowed teeth giants elsewhere around the world. And I have some photos of an archaeological find in the country Rwanda, where they're digging up a skull, which is about the size of this excavator's torso. It's just massive. And from what I've been able to tell, these are not hoaxed, that this was indeed a news story. The people in the little village near there were freaked out. They ran away in terror. But nonetheless, some of these photos did get leaked out.
Brad, what is the political affiliation with the Smithsonian? Is it a government agency? Is it an independent? Is it private? Is it public? What is it?
Well, we have the Smithsonian Museum right on the mall in Washington, D.C. So it is kind of the quasi-government office, although I do think it is technically operated in private hands, just like the National Geographic Society. Mm-hmm. Yet I do think that they work with some of the think tank groups like CFR or maybe some of the lesser-known groups in the USA that like to keep the wraps on these kind of stories. So when some of these stories do break, if they even get the light of day in our media, which is pretty rare, but around the world, they certainly try to keep the wraps on it. And I wish that would end. I really do. I think we're not little children. We can handle the truth, and sometimes the truth is indeed stranger than fiction.
But, the way I see it, Brad, and correct me if I'm wrong, the reason why a lot of this information is being suppressed is that if we, the people, knew the truth, then the powers that are in place right now would not have the same control over us as they do.
Well, that is as the argument goes. But look, we know that the Brookings Institution had this study in the 1950s that says we cannot release any kind of UFO information to the public. They'll just freak out. And the example they gave in this report was that Orson Welles'
War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds, yeah, where people did freak out, sure enough. But, that was in the 1930s. I think we've matured enough since then.
Look at all the movies that have been on, playing out the giant screens over the years. E.T., Independence Day, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the remake of The War of the Worlds, and that's just to name a few. I want to believe, I really want to believe, Brad, but I want to see proof. I'm doing the show now for 24 years. I've heard a lot of things, that make sense, but still missing the proof. And I was asked by a guest the other day, so what will it take? Somebody to show you the proof before you believe? And I said, yes. What is so wrong with that?
Let's get some crafts to land right there in Hamilton, Ontario, right in front of your studio. How about that?
I'll tell you something. If a craft ever landed here in Hamilton, Ontario, in front of our studios, that would mean there is no intelligent life out there.
Well, maybe they just want to be on your show.
There's an idea. Thanks, Brad. Hey, listen, Brad, you and I have to take a few breaks. Please stand by. Great talking to you again. And as always, you are more than welcome here anytime, old friend.
Oh, I appreciate that, Rob.
All right, stand by, Brad. Brad OLSEN is my guest this hour, X-Zone Nation. Once again, for more information on Brad, you can Google his name. Everything is there. To buy a book, Amazon.com. Go to his website, bradolsen.com, or www.cccpublishing.com. I'll be back on the other side of this very short break as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Live and around the world on the Starcom Radio Network. Don't go away.
Manifestation is driven by imagination, intent, and passion. In our culture, all three have been distorted and disabled by modern media and exploitation. Re-engage your imagination and your passion by entering into the world of paranormal romance. Kahir O'Donnell takes her readers on an exciting journey into the endless possibilities of loving, passionate, and mutually respectful male-female relationship. Her latest book, The Long Dark Night, features special ops adventure, a daring rescue, a psychic woman from the stars, and a special agent that will die to protect her. The Long Dark Night by Kahira O'Donnell is now available at kahiraodonnell.com or amazon.com. Modern Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olsen, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olsen, visit www.bradolsen.com. That's www.bradolsen.com.
Nita Hickok is an expert in exorcisms, psychic warfare, soul healing, angelology, soul retrieval, demonology, energy healing, long-distance healing, astral healing, and much more. Nita is an interfaith minister because she believes all gods and goddesses are valid and that they are part of one divine force that is incomprehensible to us who are incarnated upon this earth. Nita has been doing astral healing, distant healing, spirit release, exorcism, house cleansing and blessings, soul restoring and revival, psychic vampire removal and curse removal, and much more for over 40 years. For more information or to contact Nita Hickok, visit her website at www.astralhealer.com. That's www.astralhealer.com.
In the world today, most people want what is called the American dream. They want love, a family, a fancy car, and a nice home in a nice neighborhood. They also want a good job and money to travel to interesting places. Life is great because they have the American dream. But what happens to this dream if they hear they have a devastating illness like lung cancer? The doctor may tell them they need treatment immediately or they will be dead in 6 months. He tells them you need surgery and then you need chemotherapy to get better. When they get home, they think of many unanswered questions. They ask themselves, will I survive when so many of my friends with cancer have died? How will I deal with the pain, hair loss, nausea and vomiting, sore mouth and other side effects of chemotherapy and pain of surgery? Will I be able to keep on working? What will happen to my family? Then they look at the internet and wonder, is there a better way to deal with lung cancer and return to my American dream? Carl Helvey can tell you yes, there is a better way. Carl Helvey is a registered nurse with a doctorate in public health and a 38-year lung cancer survivor. Carl was given 6 months to live when diagnosed, and he refused chemotherapy and surgery. Carl used alternative interventions. Those not only helped him overcome lung cancer, but also to remain cancer-free and healthy for over the past 36 years since recovery. In his book, You Can Beat Cancer Using Alternative Integrative Interventions, Dr. Helvey will tell you his story of using all-natural treatments for lung cancer and continuing to work during his treatment. Free of pain and discomfort, Carl will also share how he remained cancer and disease-free since then without chronic illnesses or prescribed medications. His story is supplemented with chapters by Dr. Bernie Siegel, Dr. Francesco Contreras, and Dr. James Forsyth, alternative integrative physicians, and Dr. Kim Dalzell and Tanya Harder-Pierce, health professionals. All have successfully helped others overcome cancer. Research presented by the alternative physicians on their treatments for lung cancer demonstrate a significantly higher long-term survival rate for lung cancer clients than those obtained by conventional doctors. In addition, their clients were free of or had reduced side effects. You Can Beat Lung Cancer Using Alternative Integrative Interventions by Dr. Carl Helvey is now available at all major book outlets and at www.beatlungcancer.net. That's www.beatlungcancer.net. This information may help you return to the American dream.
Hi, this is Eric Rawls of Cosmoverse.com, and you're listening to Rob McConnell in the X Zone.
Hi, this is Blade Runner, and you are listening to Canada's #1 paranormal radio show, The X Zone, with Rob McConnell.
Hi, I'm Laura Sabrin of Feast to Fields Organic Vineyard in Jordan, and you're listening to Canada's #1 paranormal radio show, The X Zone, with Rob McConnell.
Hi, my name is Lady Ashley, the White Witch of Niagara-on-the-Lake, and you're listening to Canada's #1 paranormal talk radio show, The X Zone, with Rob McConnell.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Brad Olsen is my guest this hour, www.bradolsen.com and www.cccpublishing.com. Thanks for being with us, Brad. It's always a pleasure having you on, my friend. You're one of the hardest working publishers in this industry these days. You're always busy, and if you're not writing, if you're not publishing, you're out doing research, traveling the world, visiting sacred sites. So tell me, what do you do on vacation?
Well, that's part of traveling and research.
Exactly.
You've got to be multitasking all the time.
Brad, one of the topics that you and I have talked about before are lost continents. There's the lost continent of Mu. There's the lost continent of Atlantis. I know for a fact that Frank Joseph is planning an expedition to look for Atlantis. I believe it's next year. And here we have this legendary continent that Plato talked about. And so many years after, people are still looking. In your opinion, because you've done so many things in your lifetime, researched so many topics, do you think we're any closer to getting to the bottom of the Atlantis enigma?
Well, Frank Joseph's a friend of mine. We both spoke at a conference last August, and I have great respect for his work.
As I do.
Yeah, he's a wonderful guy.
Yep.
And we talked about this, actually. I'm glad you brought it up, because there was this pyramid-shaped structure near the Azores Island, which has just been discovered in the last couple years. That's a clue. That should definitely be checked out. Now, you can't go down there in conventional scuba gear. I do believe it's over 1,000 feet deep. But if any of your listeners want to learn more about it, they can just Google Azores underwater pyramid and see schematics and where it is located. Now, I think the more compelling underwater ruins, and in the case of finding Atlantis, when you find things that are man-made underwater, well, that's pretty compelling. That shows that either humanity has been around for a long time and was building in megalithic stones, such as the Bimini Roads off of the island of Bimini in the Bahamas,
Yep.
or other artifacts also in the Bahamas that have been found. The most intriguing to me, though, is the one that was found off the island of Cuba about a decade ago, and it was way down there, like 2,000 feet down, and I have images of it in Modern Esoteric in the Lost Continents chapter, and the schematics of that look just like a Mayan city with a central pyramid and smaller pyramids all around a central courtyard. So to me, that is pretty close to being a smoking gun as far as some kind of antediluvian civilization that had been around a long time ago before the continent shifted, and this obviously sank to a great depth.
What about Easter Island, the heads of Easter Island? What is your opinion of what they are and what they stand for? We don't even know who placed them there, do we?
Who placed them there? Well, I cover that in Sacred Places Around the World, and I do think there's no real mystery as far as an antediluvian civilization or ETs or anything like that. But the very first group of people that came there were Dutch mariners who arrived on Easter Sunday, hence the name. And they did say that there were two very distinct groups of people on the island. One of them was very much like a Pacific Islander type, and the other had more Caucasian-like features, and they were the ones who were very worshipful of these statues. Well, Captain Cook came a decade or so after the Dutch, and he had found that there had been a lot of turmoil on the island. Many of the statues had been toppled over, and it appeared that the Polynesian-type people had wiped out all the rest of the others, or very, very few of them were remaining. So there was this great struggle for the resources. And, I always talk about Easter Island as an example of how overconsumption of resources can lead to total disaster. And that's basically the story of Easter Island.
How about the lost continent of Mu?
Well, Mu is, of course, much, much older. That was a term coined by Churchwood, who was a great explorer of the 19th century and had charted out, made a map, a very famous map of it being in the Pacific Basin. And more people commonly refer to this continent as Lemuria. And the best evidence I can cite for that being real are the ruins below an island off of southern Japan, as well as Malden Island, smack dab in the middle of the Pacific, that have stone roads that basically go right into the ocean, debris of what appeared to be a temple, as well as on the island of Java. There is a very, very old pyramid there that also shows signs that had been washed over in a giant tsunami or tidal wave, and that too has some dating referring to at least 12,000 years old. So very, very old.
We made a brief reference earlier to UFOs and extraterrestrials. In all these ancient artifacts, are there a lot of references made to what we would classify as UFOs and aliens?
Well, not really so much in the Sacred Places books. I can only say that there are certain places like Mount Shasta here in California, where I'm at, that is a very sacred mountain to many Indian tribes of the Northwest who have a mythology of seeing crafts, as well as in the modern age. It's kind of like Sedona. It's a New Age Mecca where people come and they claim they have sightings. Now, I climbed Mount Shasta in 1997. I didn't get invited to the inner city called Talos or meet Philos, the guy who takes people in. But like you, Rob, I want to believe.
Yeah.
But nothing tangible there.
So where do you see archaeology progressing the fastest? Is it in the Middle East? Is it in the Orient? Is it in Egypt? Where do you see the most archaeological finds being discovered these days?
Well, certainly if we were to take an open-minded look at what the Giza Plateau is, as well as what's below it, as I mentioned earlier, we could have some very stunning revelations. But I think we can make great discoveries all over the place, including Canada and right here in North America, with some more disclosure about, say, for example, who built those beehive stone chambers in New England, which I actually did a DVD on since we've spoken, called The Prehistoric Chambers of New England. There are hundreds of these, and I've visited them every time I get out to the East Coast. I make a trip up to New England to go check out some more. They're totally incredible, but no recognition whatsoever, except for the best one, which is in Upton, Massachusetts, has finally preserved the Upton Stone Chamber in a little city park. The first time I visited there, when I was working on Sacred Places North America, there was a big tire in the middle, and I felt compelled to clean it out and tidy up, because to me these places are incredible. And by the way, that Upton Stone Chamber has solstice alignments to a hill across the valley called Pratt Hill, where they found these giant cairns, which presumably had poles a long time ago, and very similar to Stonehenge, could have acted as a prehistoric calendar.
Once again, we talk about prehistoric calendars, and as soon as you mention ancient calendar, everybody goes back to the Mayan calendar. And as soon as I hear Mayan calendar, I just think of December the 21st, 2012. Big fizzle.
Hey, I was on your show.
Yeah, that's right.
The 24-hour marathon.
My gosh. Yeah, that was something else. And, I was mentioning to a friend today that when Laura and I went down to the Mayan to do the research in preparation for our show, one of the elders said, well, let me put it to you this way. Now, you've got to imagine this little Mayan. He puts his hands on his hips. And he reminded me of Ed Sullivan a little, the way his head would rock around. And he says, let me put it to you this way. You in North America take your calendars down New Year's Eve and put your new ones up after midnight. He said, well, with us, it's the exact same thing. And I said, well, what about the end of the world? He said, we don't know who started it. But he said, I'll tell you something. It's great for tourism.
Well, isn't that the case with all these anomalies sometimes?
But now there's talk about the end of the world in 2017. Some people are now saying 2056. Why do we have this fixation, Brad, with the world ending? Like, I love the world. I don't want to see it end. I do everything I can to keep it going.
Oh, I'm with you there. I think it's kind of ridiculous. And how many of these dates have we seen come and go and nothing happens? Remember that guy Harold Camping?
Oh, my
gosh. I even saw his billboards on the freeway, like, this is the date the world's going to end. So I think it's silly.
I think when we did the show, the 24-hour marathon, we had counted more than 286 end time predictions.
Hey, we're still here.
Yes, we are. Or is this just a figment of our imagination? Are we really gone? Did E.T. come and take us? And if E.T.s are so much smarter than we terrestrial humans are, how come the little devil couldn't figure out that he couldn't call home?
Yeah, good point.
Why didn't he have his own little gizmo like Captain Kirk would have had, where he just flips it and, beam me up, Scotty? So, all seriousness now, I understand that a lot of these ancient myths are actually being created by people in this time in order to spark interest or to spark stupidity sometimes, as was the case in the Mayan calendar. But it gives us an awareness. It gives us the urge to want to learn more. Because in order to understand the present, we need to look at the past. And to understand the future, we need to understand the present. So it's a win-win situation.
Sure, and look at how the Mayan calendar, even though there was no end date, no end of the world, but look at how the interest in what the Mayan calendar was based on a series of wheels, how that became a topic of interest. So maybe it's in a good way that this information does percolate up there so people become aware of it, but I think you and I would agree you got to be a little skeptical sometimes on some of these claims.
As I've said many times, the largest septic tank that man has ever created is called the Internet. Do you remember the old saying, well, if it's on the Internet, it has to be true?
Right. Never a typo or never a wrong date or anything else.
I mean, like it's just like when everybody was getting ready for the end of the world, and on December 31st, 1999, Y2K. Remember that?
Yeah.
Well, if
hey,
you're worried,
Rob, you're so good at asking questions. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
This is on behalf of my dad, who I'd like to give a shout out. It's his 77th birthday today.
Well, happy birthday.
His name's Marshall.
Marshall, happy birthday.
He's traveling with his wife, Susan, up to Canada right now, and they're going to do a trip around Lake Superior. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if you could maybe tip them off on some cool things to see up there.
Lake Superior is beautiful. It's the largest of the Great Lakes, and it is known for its storms, sudden storms. It was in Lake Superior that the Edmund Fitzgerald sank under very suspicious terms. The scenery is beautiful. The people are very friendly. He's going to have a great time. A lot of lighthouses. But he's going to have a great time. That's all I can tell him.
I was trying to steer him in the direction of Isle Royale and some of the ancient copper pit mines there in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
That's very interesting because many believe that the Egyptians actually went to that part in order to get copper and brought copper back to Egypt.
Right.
For the manufacture of bronze.
Possibly even Phoenician as well. Yeah. And I was on the show called America Unearthed earlier this year in January. And last summer we filmed in Chicago. In the episode, it was called The Bloodstone, but it was really about this very enigmatic rock on the banks of the Chicago River called the Wabanzi Stone. And if you know anything about that, it is the oldest artifact in Chicago. And it's a giant boulder, a glacial erratic that actually came from the Canadian Shield up your way, and it got pushed down with the glaciers. And it was this giant boulder, but it has this face carved onto it. In fact, it's so cool. I put it on the cover of Sacred Places North America, this Wabanzi stone, and it has a giant bowl on the top of the head of this boulder stone, as well as another mooring stone type holding. But the bowl on the top of the head has a connection that emits fluid out the mouth of this flat-faced, eyes closed, kind of like an occult-looking face. And then not only that, but after it pours out of the mouth, it goes into a catch basin in the man's goatee. And of course, Native Americans weren't known for facial hair.
No, they weren't.
So what's a flat-faced sculpture doing on the banks of the Chicago River? So the whole premise of the show, and I think the reason why they had me come down there and appear on it, was that we were examining what it was about Chicago that was so very strategic for ancient travels. Do you know the answer?
No.
Well, it is the closest confluence of rivers. From the south bank of the Chicago River goes to this place called Mud Lake, and that's where we filmed my segment, at a place called the Chicago Portage. And indeed, the Native Americans took Lewis and
down
Joliet.
in Mississippi.
Marquette. All the French explorers knew about it because in the time of a lot of rain, heavy spring rainfall, you could actually get a heavily laden ship from the South Branch through Mud Lake to the Des Plaines River, which leads to the Illinois River, which then goes to the Mississippi, all downward flow. So the presumption is that some very ancient culture created this stone, and it has since lasted to this modern age.
Either that or a bunch of drunken Irish cops in Chicago decided to have a lot of fun at everybody else's expense. After all, isn't it in Chicago where they put green dye into the water?
They do indeed.
Anything's possible in Chicago.
Yeah, well, that's where I grew up.
Really?
Yeah, and they actually have a larger Polish, the second largest Polish population outside of Warsaw, too.
Wow, didn't know that. I knew there were a lot of Irish in Chicago.
Oh. Well, you know how there are so many Irish everywhere. An Irish pub in every city.
That's true. Everybody believes in leprechauns, right?
When you've had enough to drink.
God bless the Guinness. That's all I have to say. Love that brew. So what's up in the near future for Brad Olsen?
Well, I am just phasing out of the How Weird Street Fair, which is a big festival I produce here in San Francisco. We just did it last April. My dad actually came out for that for the first time. I think he had a good time. And so now I'm back into my publishing projects, which is working on a third book in the esoteric series that probably is going to take about 2 years to get out, only because I signed a 5-book deal with an Italian author named Leo Lion-Zagami. And we have the first of his book out now called Pope Francis, the Last Pope, Money, Masons, and Occultism in the Decline of the Catholic Church.
Ooh.
And right now, just before you called me on Skype, I was working on editing Confessions of an Illuminati, which is really interesting, and we got to get him on the X Zone.
Anytime. Let's do it, my friend, because those are two very, very interesting topics that I love talking about, because there is more to this world than we see. There has to be, because what we see doesn't make sense anymore. So, Brad, listen, as always, my good friend, thank you so much for joining us. Let our listeners know how they can get your books and how they can get more information on you.
Well, to find out more about me, you can just go to www.bradolsen.com. That's spelled OLSEN. My publishing website is CCC Publishing, which you can read all of our books with the Google Books app. I made my books all 100% accessible. You can follow me on Facebook. I have a Esoteric Series YouTube channel as well as a Facebook page. And I mentioned earlier, Stompers.com is an old website I did about my 3-year trip around the world and how I got propelled into the world of travel writing and now book publishing.
And the rest is history.
Yeah.
Brad, I want to thank you so much, my friend. Always great talking to you, and I look forward to the next time you and I meet back here in the X Zone. And please, let's get your new author on to talk about the Illuminati and much more.
I will get that information over to you right away.
Thanks a lot, Brad. Take care of yourself, and once again, to your dad, happy birthday.
Oh, that's sweet. Thank you, Rob.
Take care, my
friend. Great to talk to you again.
Bye-bye. X Zone Nation, Brad Olsen, OLSEN, has been my guest of this hour. And you can find out more about Brad by going to his website, www.bradolsen.com and www.cccpublishing.com. Now, I'll be back on the other side of the top of the hour as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Joining me next, Major Kevin Randall, and I will be discussing UFOs, UFO crashes, and the Roswell crash of 1947. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and you're listening to us around the world on the Starcom Radio Network. Don't forget, check out Ed Till Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. That's the Ed Till Show, right here on the same network as the X Zone Radio Show, and that is the Starcom Radio Network. Don't go away.